Your Excellency, Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Forests and Natural Resources of Kenya, dear colleagues from the African Development Bank, from different institutions, non-governmental organizations, dear representatives from local communities, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Nairobi, a place that we in UNEP also call home, next to our Kenyan hosts. A famous Swahili wisdom says, haba na haba hujaza kibaba, which translates as little by little, the pot gets filled. Every small change at the community level on adaptation contributes over time to global success. The famous story that late Wangari Maathai used to tell of the hummingbird is also true for adaptation. Climate change this year is in every mind. Conferences, research actions, field projects. The road to Paris goes through meetings like this one. Needless to say, this road to Paris will be bumpy, and that's all right as we prepare for the conference. But once we get to Paris, at the climate conference, we should all be ready to sign a landmark climate agreement. Our level of ambition in Paris will to a large extent determine the future trajectory we want for our planet and for people. Adaptation has long been considered as a local issue. Well, not anymore in international negotiations. Much of the world's attention has been focused on how strongly countries will commit to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. This, of course, is crucial to ensure that any agreement will prevent global temperatures from rising to the 2 degrees Celsius target above pre-industrial levels that we set to ourselves. However, make no mistake, even if we cap our emissions today, climate change is here to stay. It is hitting hard and will affect all of us, leaving no option to nobody but to adapt. Contrary to what some believe, all nations, no matter rich or poor, will need to design and develop their adaptation plans. Poor countries are obviously more vulnerable and have limited resources to face the new threat. Adaptation is coming at high cost to humanity. According to the UNEP Global Adaptation Gap Report, published for the first time last year in Lima, costs for adaptation could climb as high as $150 billion per annum by 2030. They can even skyrocket to 250 to 500 billion per year by 2050 in the worst case scenario. Enough progress was made in Lima to give hope that an agreement on emission reductions can be reached. Much less certain, though, is how the international community plans to deliver funding, technology, knowledge, and the tools that countries, communities, and ecosystems need to adapt efficiently to climate change. In 1997-1998, Kenya, the country we are in, experienced floods that cost the economy up to $1 billion. Then followed a devastating drought, which cost close to $3 billion. Recently, the 2011 drought contributed to inflation that caused maize prices to rise 55% above global levels. And there is, of course, the human cost in terms of livelihoods damage and traditional ways of life, such as pastoralism. Such calamities will unfortunately only be more frequent. Some countries could already see that, unfortunately, man-made structures such as seawalls, with the minimum consideration of the contributions of ecosystems, are not necessarily efficient, nor are they sustainable. Ecosystem-based adaptation options can be especially relevant where the cost of technical solutions is prohibitively high. In Santa Cruz, in the US, for example, a barrier of salt marshes as little as 10 meters wide could reduce wave height by 50%. By extending to 500 meters, the reduction was typically 90%. Nature-based solutions are often cheaper, more resilient, and have multiple benefits. We should work with nature, as we cannot work against the force of nature. Local communities have unique knowledge in identifying the ecosystem services that underpin livelihoods and ensure their good management. Such knowledge is often overlooked, if not ignored, by scientists and experts. Adaptation measures should be ecosystem-based and community-based. A fundamental step forward was made by the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, when they decided last year to formally integrate indigenous and local knowledge in their assessments. Communities, in their wisdom, have been using ecosystem-based adaptation for hundreds of years, as evidenced in agricultural practices developed in the Sahara. Ladies and gentlemen, the first UN Environmental Assembly gave mandate to UNEP, working with governments, scientific institutions, UN agencies, civil society, and other stakeholders to support countries in preparing ecosystem-based adaptation programs. It was remarkable that UNEP got a mandate from an intergovernmental body to specifically work on ecosystem-based adaptation. Such actions can only be implemented through community-based adaptation. Through the landscape approach, UNEP contributes to over 30 ecosystem-based adaptation initiatives that help communities in diverse ecosystems, from mountains to the coast, to build resilience to climate change. In addition to the Mau ecosystem that I understand many of you visited over the weekend, UNEP supports pastoral communities in the Peruvian Andes to maintain the carrying capacity of their lands, protect water resources, and open up new sources of income by adopting the management of wild populations of the native vicuña, animals valued for their precious wool. Science and evidence show the urgent need for adaptation, but measuring the impact of adaptation projects and their efficiency is not always easy. There are useful tools put in place to measure the impact of the adaptation programs, but we still need to learn a lot about enhancing the efficiency of adaptation measures through monitoring and evaluation tools. A review supported by UNEP of the evidence base of the effectiveness of ecosystem-based adaptation was published last year in the journal Climate and Development. We found that while there was some evidence for the positive social, environmental, and economic benefits of ecosystem-based adaptation, there still remain significant gaps in the overall evidence base. This meeting, therefore, should contribute to further documenting and measuring the efficiency of adaptation techniques. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to bring about a sustainable development that leaves no one behind, especially at the community level, where people have and face difficulties in accessing or benefiting natural resources, funding will be critical. Le nerf de la guerre, as they say in French. Unfortunately, the world is largely unprepared to cover the cost of adaptation. In Africa alone, the cost of adaptation could rise as high as $50 billion per annum by 2050, according to UNEP's latest Africa Adaptation Gap report. The additional burden will be unbearable for most developing countries, especially least developed countries and SIDS. In some parts of the world, we are making progress in addressing adaptation needs. Evidence suggests that African countries such as Ghana, Ethiopia, and South Africa are already committing some domestic resources to adaptation efforts. Hypothetical case studies suggest that by 2030, under moderately optimistic growth scenarios, Ghana and Ethiopia should commit close to $250 million each to adaptation, while South Africa will get close to $1 billion. Globally, adaptation funding from public sources reached 23 to 26 billion in 2013. However, this excludes what civil society and communities are doing. The main challenge will be to mobilize private financing for adaptation, including ecosystem-based adaptation. Fundamentally, global support on adaptation, incorporating financing, technology, and knowledge, could go a long way towards advancing countries' sustainable development aspirations. I thank you for your attention.